The neon rain fell in sheets across Neo-Singapore's lower districts, each droplet carrying traces of industrial pollutants that made the streets shimmer with toxic beauty. Jackson Reed pulled his hood tighter as he navigated the maze of narrow alleys, his left temple throbbing with the familiar ache that had plagued him for months. The neural implant scars along his hairline had begun to fester again, despite the expensive military-grade antibiotics he'd been cycling through. 3 blocks from the main thoroughfare, he found the clinic exactly where his contact had promised. No sign, no advertisement, just a faded red cross painted on rusted metal. The door scanner read his biometrics with a soft chime, and he descended into the underground medical facility that served those who couldn't afford questions along with their treatment. The waiting area smelled of ozone and antiseptic, populated by the kinds of people who lived in society's margins. Augmented street soldiers nursing damaged cybernetics, corporate refugees hiding from their former employers, and others whose modifications placed them outside legal medical care. Jackson kept his head down, fingers unconsciously tracing the raised lines of scar tissue that mapped his skull like a circuit board. "Next," called a voice that carried both mechanical precision and unexpected warmth. He followed the sound into a treatment room where a woman stood with her back to him, organizing surgical instruments with movements too fluid to be entirely human. When she turned, her eyes were the first thing he noticed. They held an inner light that pulsed gently with her heartbeat, and when she looked at him, he felt as though she was seeing far more than his surface wounds. "I'm Vera Cross," she said, extending a hand that felt warm despite the visible circuitry beneath her translucent skin. "You're here about infected implant sites?" "That's right." Jackson settled onto the examination table, noting how her movements suggested both medical training and combat experience. "They've been getting worse despite standard treatment protocols." Vera activated a scanner that bathed his head in soft blue light, her enhanced eyes tracking data streams invisible to normal vision. "These aren't standard neural implants," she said after a moment, her tone shifting to something between confusion and concern. "The scarring pattern suggests forced removal rather than surgical extraction." "I was told they were communication arrays," Jackson replied, though even as he spoke, the explanation felt hollow. "Military standard issue." "Perhaps," Vera said carefully, "but the neural pathways show signs of memory interface technology, much more sophisticated than simple communication devices." She moved closer, her empathic sensors automatically adjusting to his emotional state. "May I?" When her cybernetic fingertips touched the infected scars along his temple, Jackson felt a sensation like electricity mixed with ice water flowing through his nervous system. But it was Vera who gasped, her eyes widening as her sensors detected something unexpected. "That's impossible," she whispered, her hand still pressed against his skin. "There's active data storage embedded in the scar tissue itself." "What kind of data?" Vera's expression grew troubled as her systems processed what they were detecting. "Encrypted memory fragments. But they don't match your current neural patterns." She stepped back, her enhanced vision showing her readings that made no sense according to everything she understood about human neurology. "Someone has been very thorough in altering your memories, Jackson. These scars aren't just from removed implants. They're evidence of systematic memory manipulation." The words hit him like a physical blow. Everything he thought he knew about his past, his military service, even his own identity, suddenly felt uncertain. "You're saying someone changed my memories?" "I'm saying," Vera replied, her voice gentle but firm, "that whoever told you those were communication implants lied to you. And based on what I'm seeing, they lied about a lot more than that." She began preparing more sophisticated scanning equipment. "The question is whether you want to know the truth, even if it means discovering that everything you remember about yourself might be fabricated." Jackson looked at his reflection in the darkened window. Seeing a stranger's face marked with scars, it told a story he couldn't remember. Outside, the neon rain continued to fall, washing the streets clean of one layer of grime while depositing another. The choice before him felt similar, painful but necessary. "Show me," he said. The abandoned server farm lay 3 levels beneath Neo-Singapore's financial district. Its cooling systems long since failed, leaving behind a cathedral of silent machines that hummed with residual power. Vera led Jackson through corridors lined with defunct quantum processors, their biometric scanners following their movement with dying electronic eyes. This place went dark during the Great Blackout of '54, Vera explained, her enhanced vision navigating the darkness effortlessly. But the data storage cores are still intact, and more importantly, disconnected from any external networks. If we're going to extract what's hidden in your scars, we need complete isolation. She guided him to a chamber where she'd constructed a makeshift laboratory from salvaged medical equipment and military-grade computers. The setup looked like something between a surgeon's theater and a hacker's den, cables snaking across the floor like digital veins feeding into processing units that cast everything in pale blue light. The data embedded in your scar tissue is encrypted with quantum-level security, Vera said, preparing neural interface cables. Extraction is going to feel like having your memories torn apart and reassembled. Are you certain you want to proceed? Jackson nodded, though his hands trembled as she attached the neural links to his temple. The moment the connection activated, pain shot through his skull like lightning, and suddenly he was experiencing fragments of memories that felt both familiar and completely foreign. He saw himself in a sterile laboratory, but his reflection in the observation windows showed a different face entirely. Scientists in white coats spoke about Project Tabula Rasa while injecting something into his spine. He heard his own voice, but speaking words he didn't remember saying. The subjects won't remember the experiments once the memory overlay is complete. My God, Vera whispered, watching the data stream across her monitors. You weren't a test subject, Jackson. You were one of the researchers. The extracted memories painted a horrifying picture. Jackson's real name was Dr. Julian Blackthorne, a brilliant neuroscientist who had developed revolutionary memory manipulation technology for a corporation called Mnemonic Industries. But something had gone wrong. The memories showed him discovering that the company was using his research not just to treat trauma patients, but to create an army of unknowing agents whose entire identities were fabricated. I tried to expose them, Jackson said, his voice hollow. As more memories surfaced, I gathered evidence, prepared to go public. But they got to me first. Vera's empathic sensors detected waves of anguish radiating from him as he relived the moment of his capture. They had strapped him to his own memory manipulation device, erasing Dr. Julian Blackthorne and replacing him with Jackson Red, a fictional military operative with implanted memories of service that never happened. But they made a mistake, Vera observed, studying the data patterns. They embedded the original memories in your scar tissue as a failsafe, probably intending to extract them later for their research. Instead, your body rejected the neural implants, creating permanent scarring that preserved the evidence of who you really are. The laboratory's computers chimed as they finished processing the extracted data. On the screens appeared files that documented hundreds of other victims, their identities erased and replaced with fabricated personas designed to serve Mnemonic Industries' agenda. Scientists, journalists, government officials, all transformed into unwitting corporate assets. There's more, Vera said, her voice tight with anger. The memory overlays weren't just about control. They were harvesting the original personalities, storing them like software to be analyzed and replicated. Every person they erased became template data for creating more sophisticated artificial identities. Jackson stared at the evidence of his former life, feeling like a ghost haunting his own existence. How many others are out there, living false lives while their real selves are trapped in corporate databases. According to this, thousands. Vera began copying the data to encrypted storage devices. But there's something else. The file's reference. Someone called the architect, the original creator of the memory manipulation technology. Someone who supposedly escaped mnemonic industries and has been working to reverse their experiments. She pulled up a location marker embedded in the deepest layers of the extracted data. There's an address here, hidden in your subconscious memories. If this architect is real, and if they're still alive, they might be our only hope of helping these people recover their true identities. As they prepared to leave the server farm, Jackson caught his reflection in a darkened monitor screen. The face looking back at him was the same, but now he knew it belonged to someone else entirely. Dr. Julian Blackthorne had been murdered and replaced, but somehow, impossibly, he was still alive beneath the fiction. What if the architect can't help us? He asked. What if the original personalities are gone forever? Vira's cybernetic hand found his shoulder, her empathic sensors radiating determination mixed with compassion. Then we make mnemonic industries. Pay for every life they've stolen, she said. But first, we find this architect and learn if the dead can truly be brought back to life. The entrance to the old subway tunnel was hidden behind a holographic projection that made it appear to be solid concrete. Marcus Vale had chosen his location well, 3 stories beneath the city, where the ancient rail lines created a maze that even corporate security avoided. When Vera and Jackson descended into the depths, they found themselves in a world that predated the digital age, where rust and decay provided perfect camouflage for the most advanced technology either of them had ever encountered. Dr. Julian Blackthorne, Marcus said without turning around, his fingers dancing across a control interface that seemed to respond to his thoughts as much as his touch. I wondered when you would find your way back to the living. The man who turned to face them bore the weathered appearance of someone who had spent years hiding from powerful enemies. His left arm was entirely cybernetic neural interface ports gleaming along his skull, and his eyes held the particular intensity of someone who had seen too much of humanity's capacity for evil. You're the architect, Jackson said, though the title felt inadequate for the person standing before them. I prefer Marcus. And yes, I created the memory manipulation technology that mnemonic industries perverted into their weapon of mass psychological destruction. He gestured to the laboratory around them, where dozens of medical pods lined the walls like technological cocoons. I've spent the last 3 years trying to undo the damage my research caused. The laboratory was a miracle of improvised engineering. Marcus had combined military medical equipment with cutting-edge neuroscience technology, creating a facility capable of performing the most delicate operations on human consciousness. But it was the occupied medical pods that drew their attention. Men and women floating in support fluid, neural monitors tracking their brain activity. Victims of mnemonics experiments, Marcus explained. I've managed to rescue 17 people so far, but the memory restoration process is incredibly dangerous. 3 of them have been in induced comas for 6 months while I work to separate their original personalities from the fabricated overlays. Vera approached one of the pods, her empathic sensors detecting the complex neural patterns of someone whose mind was literally fighting itself. How is it possible to reverse such extensive memory manipulation? The human brain is remarkably resilient, Marcus replied, calling up holographic displays that showed neural pathway reconstructions. Even when memories are suppressed or replaced, traces of the original personality remain embedded in deep brain structures. The challenge is extracting those traces without destroying the mind entirely. Jackson studied the medical data, his recovered memories providing context that made the technical specifications comprehensible. This is based on my original research, but you've advanced it far beyond what I thought was possible. Your research. provided the foundation, but stopping mnemonic required going much further. Marcus activated a wall-mounted display that showed a network map of corporate facilities around the globe. They're not just experimenting on individuals anymore, Julian. They've begun large-scale operations, entire populations in developing nations where they can operate without oversight. The scope of their revelation was staggering. Mnemonic Industries had essentially industrialized identity theft, creating processing centers where they could strip away genuine human personalities and replace them with manufactured ones designed to serve corporate interests. The victims were then released back into society as unknowing agents, their actions guided by subliminal programming embedded in their artificial memories. But I've discovered their weakness, Marcus continued, his expression growing fierce with determination. Every fabricated identity contains a kill switch, a way to instantly deactivate the artificial personality and restore the original. It was built in as a safeguard, but Mnemonic never intended to use it. A kill switch that could free thousands of people simultaneously, Vera said, understanding the implications immediately. Exactly. But activating it requires access to Mnemonic's central processing facility, and that means infiltrating their headquarters. Marcus turned to face Jackson directly. They kept detailed records of every experiment, including the complete psychological profiles of everyone they've processed. Your original research data is there, along with the master codes needed to reverse the memory overlays. Jackson felt the weight of responsibility settling over him like a physical burden. You're asking me to break into the most secure facility in the corporate district to steal back my own research. I'm asking Dr. Julian Blackthorne to finish what he started, Marcus corrected. You created this technology to help people recover from trauma, to give them back their lives. Mnemonic Industries has turned it into an instrument of enslavement. Only you have the knowledge and security clearance to get us inside. One of the medical pods began chiming with alerts, its occupant showing signs of neural distress as competing personality patterns fought for dominance. Marcus rushed to stabilize the patient, his hands moving with practiced efficiency across the control interfaces. Time is running out, he said as he worked. Mnemonic is planning something called Project Renaissance, a mass deployment of their memory manipulation technology that will affect millions of people simultaneously. If we don't stop them within the next 72 hours, the false identities will become permanent, integrated so deeply into the neural structure that even the kill switch won't be able to reverse them. Vera's empathic sensors detected the mixture of fear and determination radiating from both men. What do you need from us? Marcus looked up from his patient, his cybernetic arm gleaming in the laboratory's artificial light. I need someone who can get us past mnemonic security systems, and I need someone who can navigate their data networks once we're inside. He paused, studying Jackson's face carefully. But most importantly, I need Julian Blackthorne to remember why he became a neuroscientist in the first place. Because saving these people is going to require sacrifices that Jackson Reed was never prepared to make. As if summoned by his words, the laboratory's communication system activated, displaying an incoming message from an encrypted source. The holographic image that appeared showed a woman with quantum-enhanced eyes and neural modifications that suggested both military training and advanced hacking capabilities. Marcus, the woman said, her voice carrying urgency that made them all straighten with attention. It's Nix. I've found something. Mnemonic isn't just planning Project Renaissance. They're already implementing it. And their first target is every enhanced individual in Neo-Singapore. Nix Blackwater materialized in the laboratory through a quantum transmission that left traces of silver light hanging in the air. Her physical presence was both striking and unsettling. Her neural modifications were more extensive than anything Jackson had seen, creating patterns of circuitry beneath her skin that pulsed with data streams from multiple sources simultaneously. The corporate networks are buzzing with encrypted communications, she said without preamble, her quantum processors already interfacing with Marcus's systems to share intelligence. Mnemonic Industries initiated the first phase of Project Renaissance 6 hours ago. They're targeting enhanced individuals because our neural modifications make us immune to standard memory manipulation techniques. Vera's empathic sensors detected layers of concern and anger radiating from the new arrival. What kind of targeting? Nix activated a holographic display that showed real-time tracking data from across the city. They're using modified broadcasting, equipment to transmit neural disruption signals, specifically calibrated to overload cybernetic implants. Every enhanced person in Neo-Singapore is being systematically hunted by signals. That will either kill them or leave them vulnerable to forced memory reconstruction. The implications were terrifying. Marcus had built his resistance network primarily from enhanced individuals, people whose cybernetic modifications made them harder to control, but also more vulnerable to targeted attacks. Mnemonic had found a way to turn their greatest strength into a fatal weakness. We need to get inside their headquarters tonight, Marcus said, his cybernetic arm automatically beginning preparations for immediate deployment. If they complete this phase of the project, we lose our ability to resist their larger plans. I've been monitoring their security protocols, Nix continued, her quantum-enhanced vision allowing her to interface directly with surveillance networks throughout the corporate district. But there's something else. I found evidence that Jackson wasn't the only mnemonic researcher they subjected to memory reconstruction. She pulled up personnel files that showed dozens of scientists, all brilliant. Specialists in various fields, all reported as having died in accidents or disappeared under mysterious circumstances. But the real revelation came when she cross-referenced their genetic profiles with the memory manipulation experiments. They didn't just steal your research, Julian, Nick said, using his real name with deliberate emphasis. They stole the researchers themselves. Every major breakthrough in memory technology over the past 5 years came from kidnapped scientists, whose identities were erased and replaced with compliant corporate assets. Jackson studied the files, recognizing colleagues and friends he had assumed were dead. Dr. Sarah Chun, who developed quantum consciousness mapping. Dr. Robert Singh, who pioneered neural pathway reconstruction. They're all alive, living as different people with no memory of their original work. And all of them are currently inside Mnemonic's headquarters, Nix confirmed, working on Project Renaissance while believing they're loyal corporate employees, developing humanitarian applications for memory therapy. The laboratory's medical pods began displaying alerts as the neural disruption signals reached even their underground location. Marcus moved quickly to activate shielding protocols, but the technology could only provide temporary protection against Mnemonic's increasingly sophisticated attacks. We have maybe 4 hours before the signals penetrate our defenses, he said, his fingers flying across control interfaces as he prepared emergency extraction procedures for his patients. After that, every enhanced person in this facility becomes vulnerable to memory reconstruction. Vera's medical training kicked in as she helped stabilize the patients whose neural patterns were being disrupted by the broadcast signals. What's the plan? Nix activated a 3-dimensional map of Mnemonic's headquarters, her quantum processors calculating infiltration routes in real time. I can get us past the external security, but once we're inside, we'll need Julian's biometric access to reach the central processing facility. The problem is that his genetic signature will trigger alarms the moment he enters the building. Not necessarily, Marcus said, pulling up technical specifications for identity masking technology. I've been developing neural camouflage techniques, ways to temporarily suppress the brain patterns that biometric scanners use for identification. It's dangerous and only lasts about 2 hours, but it might be enough. Jackson felt the weight of recovered memories pressing against his consciousness. As he studied the infiltration plan, there's something else. When I was working for Mnemonic, I discovered that they were storing backup copies of every personality they erased. Not just as research data, but as complete consciousness templates that could be downloaded into cloned bodies. The revelation changed everything. Mnemonic wasn't just stealing identities. They were building a library of human souls, preserved and cataloged for future use. The killed switches Marcus had discovered wouldn't just restore original personalities. They would potentially activate thousands of consciousness backups, creating an army of restored individuals with detailed knowledge of Mnemonic's crimes. The central processing facility contains more than just the kill switch codes, Jackson continued, his scientific mind racing through the implications. It holds every stolen identity, every erased personality, every backup consciousness they've created. If we can access that database, we can restore not just the current victims, but everyone they've ever experimented on. Nix's quantum processors completed their analysis of the infiltration plan, highlighting weak points in Mnemonic's defenses while calculating probability matrices for mission success. We'll have a 15-minute window once we trigger the building's lockdown protocols. After that, corporate security will flood the entire facility with neural disruption fields, designed to incapacitate any enhanced individuals. 15 minutes. To download the consciousness of thousands of people and activate global memory restoration protocols, Marcus said grimly. It's barely possible, even with our combined capabilities. The laboratory shook as another wave of neural disruption. Signals pulsed through the city above them. Through the facility's communication systems, they could hear reports of enhanced individuals throughout Neo-Singapore collapsing as their cybernetic systems overloaded. Then we better get started, Vera said, her empathic sensors radiating determination, despite the fear that surrounded them all. Because every minute we delay, more people lose themselves forever. As they prepared for what might be a suicide mission, Jackson caught sight of his reflection in one of the medical displays. Dr. Julian Blackthorne looked back at him, no longer hidden beneath the fiction of Jackson Reed. Whatever happened in Mnemonic's headquarters, he would face it as himself, carrying the responsibility for both the technology's creation and its redemption. Are you ready to meet your former colleagues? Nix asked, her quantum-enhanced eyes reflecting the gravity of what lay ahead. I'm ready to give them back their lives, Jackson replied, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. All of them. The Mnemonic Industries Tower rose like a black crystal against Neo-Singapore's neon-stained sky, its quantum-encrypted facades reflecting the city's lights and patterns that seemed almost hypnotic. Nix's quantum processors had found them a maintenance entrance that bypassed the building's primary security grid. But even so, infiltrating the most secure facility in the corporate district felt like walking into the heart of a digital storm. Neural camouflage is holding steady, Marcus whispered through their encrypted communication link as they moved through service corridors that hummed with data streams. But Julian's brain patterns are still detectable at close range. We need to move fast. Vera's empathic sensors were in overdrive, detecting waves of artificial emotion, radiating from the building's research levels where hundreds of subjects underwent memory reconstruction in facilities that looked more like factories and medical centers. They're processing people in batches, she reported, her voice tight with horror. Industrial-scale personality erasure. The central processing facility occupied the tower's top 15 floors, protected by security systems that would have been impenetrable without Jackson's recovered knowledge of the building's original design. His memories of Dr. Julian Blackthorne's security clearance were still intact, embedded so deeply in his neural pathways that even Mnemonic's own memory manipulation couldn't completely erase them. There, Jackson said, indicating a biometric scanner that looked different from the others they had passed. That accesses the consciousness storage arrays. Everything they've stolen is kept behind that lock. Nix's quantum-enhanced vision analyzed the security system while our processors calculated bypass algorithms in real time. It's not just a biometric scanner. It's reading neural patterns, genetic markers, and something else, emotional resonance patterns that match the psychological profile of the original researcher. Meaning it will only open for someone who genuinely cares about the victims, Vera said, understanding immediately. They built in a safeguard to prevent their own agents from accessing the stolen personalities. Jackson approached the scanner, feeling the weight of recovered memories pressing against his consciousness. When his palm touched the biometric reader, he focused not on his anger toward mnemonic industries, but on his original motivation for developing memory therapy, the desire to help people recover from trauma and reclaim their authentic selves. The scanner chimed softly, and the vault door slid open to reveal a chamber that defied comprehension. Thousands of data storage units lined the walls, each one containing complete personality matrices, the stolen souls of mnemonics victims, preserved in quantum crystalline structures that pulsed with subtle bioluminescence. My God, Marcus breathed, his cybernetic systems detecting the massive processing power required to maintain so many consciousness patterns simultaneously. They've been collecting people for years, but it was the central workstation that drew their attention, an interface designed to manage the consciousness storage system, complete with real-time monitoring of every stored personality and the neural patterns of their current fabricated identities. The scope of mnemonics operation was staggering. Politicians, journalists, scientists, military officers, all living false lives while their real selves were trapped in digital imprisonment. There's Dr. Chan, Jackson said, identifying one of his former colleagues among the stored personalities. And Dr. Singh, Dr. Martinez, all of them. His voice cracked with emotion as he realized how many brilliant minds had been stolen and replaced. They've been working on Project Renaissance using our own research, having no idea they're developing technology to enslave others. Nix began interfacing directly with the storage system, her quantum processors working to decode the consciousness matrices while simultaneously searching for the kill switch protocols Marcus had discovered. The restoration process is more complex than we thought. Each personality has been fragmented and cross-indexed with behavioral modification algorithms. But they are intact, Vera confirmed, her empathic sensors detecting genuine human consciousness. Within the storage arrays, trapped but not destroyed. The facility's alarm systems suddenly activated, bathing everything in red light as security protocols engaged throughout the building. They've detected our presence, Marcus reported through their communication link. Corporate security is sealing the building. We have maybe 10 minutes before they flood this level with neural disruption fields. Jackson's fingers flew across the interface controls, his recovered memories providing access codes and system knowledge that even mnemonics' current security couldn't anticipate. I can activate the restoration protocol, but someone needs to maintain the connection while the consciousness download's complete. The process requires constant monitoring to prevent the personalities from fragmenting during transfer. I'll stay, Vera said immediately, her medical training making her the logical choice to monitor the biological aspects of consciousness restoration. My empathic sensors can track the personality patterns as they reintegrate, and I can maintain the quantum processing requirements, Nix added, her enhanced systems already interfacing with the storage arrays to prepare for mass data transfer. Marcus appeared in the chamber's doorway, his cybernetic arm sparking from damage sustained during his fight with security forces in the lower levels. The neural disruption systems are charging. Once they activate any enhanced individual in, the building will be incapacitated within minutes. Then we do this now, Jackson said, initiating the awakening protocol with a series of commands that sent activation signals to every consciousness storage unit in the facility. All of them. Every stolen personality, every erased identity, everyone they've ever taken. The chamber filled with the sound of thousands of storage units activating simultaneously, their bioluminescent displays brightening as dormant consciousness patterns began to awaken. Throughout Neo-Singapore and around the world, people who had been living fabricated lives suddenly stopped mid-action as their original personalities began to reassert themselves. The neural disruption fields activated with a sound like breaking glass, sending waves of incapacitating energy through the building. Marcus collapsed immediately, his cybernetic systems overloading, while Nyx fought to maintain her connection to the storage arrays even as her quantum processors began to fail. But Vera's empathic sensors, designed to detect human emotion rather than artificial intelligence, allowed her to continue monitoring the restoration process, even as the disruption fields intensified. "It's working," she reported, tears streaming down her face as she felt thousands of genuine personalities returning to consciousness after years of imprisonment. They're remembering who they really are. Jackson felt his own mind splitting as both his original personality and the fabricated Jackson Reed identity struggled for dominance under the neural disruption. But Dr. Julian Blackthorne had always been stronger, driven by the same compassion that had motivated his original research. And it was as himself that he completed the final sequence of the awakening protocol. Throughout the world, the stolen began to remember. In corporate boardrooms and government offices, in research facilities and military installations, people who had been living as unknowing agents of mnemonic industries suddenly recalled their true identities. The revelation created chaos as the scope of the memory manipulation conspiracy became undeniable. But in the consciousness storage facility, as security forces finally breached the vault doors, 4 people who had risked everything to restore stolen lives watched as the last personality patterns completed their transfer back to their rightful owners. Dr. Julian Blackthorne smiled as he collapsed, knowing that his greatest creation had finally been used for its intended purpose, giving people back their authentic selves. The memory thief's revelation had become the awakening of thousands, and in that moment of triumph, the distinction between hero and victim, between original and copy, between who we are and who we choose to become, seemed far less important than the simple truth that every consciousness deserves the freedom to be itself. In the end, that was all any of them had ever wanted, the right to remember who they really were.